Good morning. You've stumbled into the morning meeting. Hope you meant to be here on purpose, whether you're watching on YouTube or here on the two-way platform. Delighted to have you. Tim Hogan and I are welcoming in Kristen Davison, Republican strategist, subbing in for Sean, who is either on assignment or too busy to do the program. Either way, we're glad that Kristen's here. Kristen, thank you. We're waiting on Vice President Harris's interview with Wisconsin Public Radio to be released. She did the interview a few days ago. I'm not super optimistic there's going to be massive news there, but we're all standing by. If it does post, we'll give you the link in the chat, and we'll probably listen to some of that. In the meantime, as always, if you're here on the two-way platform, you'd like to be part of the conversation, please raise your hand. As always, again, we like new people too, not just the old people. The old people we love dearly. The new people, as the Clintons once said when they explained giving access to the Lincoln bedroom to both people they'd known for a long time and people they hadn't who were happened to be donors. They said sometimes old friends stayed in the Lincoln bedroom and sometimes new friends stayed in the Lincoln bedroom. We'd like new friends too. So if you've never been part of the conversation here, please raise your electronic hand and be part of it. We'll get to you in a moment. Scheduled today, the vice president's in Washington. At this point, no public events, although she is still expected to go to Pittsburgh tomorrow to give her big economic speech. Donald Trump giving an economic speech on the tax code and manufacturing today in Savannah at 1 p.m. Eastern time. His campaign has backgrounded a number of reporters to try to tee up interest in the speech. We'll talk about that. Tim Walz is raising money in Minnesota. J.D. Vance, no public events that I know of. I think he's doing debate prep today. Doug Emhoff is in Austin, Texas, and in Houston, Texas, doing campaign events, which are open to pre-credentialed editorial media only. My favorite kind of media, by the way, pre-credentialed editorial. And the president of the United States, the incumbent here in Gotham City, as is Tim, speaking his final address as president, barring some crazy 2028 reelect, at the General Assembly. And we'll be curious to see what kind of coverage that gets. Both Mike Johnson and Hakeem Jeffries have press conferences today. Jeffries is on Surprise Project 2025 at 2:15. Speaker Johnson at 10 a.m. Biggest event of the day, probably, maybe the Trump speech, but maybe 11 a.m. Speaker Johnson dedicates the Johnny Cash statue in the Capitol. All right, guys, I want to start talking about these economic speeches. One of the things I learned from Ken Mehlman when he ran the Bush campaign in 2004 is you got to have the right metrics of success. You don't care how many times something happens if it doesn't affect voters. You care about affecting voters. So, Kristen, again, welcome and thank you. Both campaigns are doing economic speeches, Trump today, Harris tomorrow. If you were running those campaigns, what would your metrics of success be for those speeches? Is it impressions on X? Is it coverage on the evening news? Where would you tell your staff, guys, this is what we need to deliver on?
For me, it would be to have every headline read the same, right? So, to have the message be consistent throughout the New York Times, the local paper, Fox News, CNN. Everyone is basically taking away the same tagline from the speech. And so you can kind of predict, Harris is going to be something, if she talks about the economy instead of abortion for a change, she's going to say something along the lines of, corporations are bad, I'm fighting for you, that sort of class warfare. Trump, we'll see if it's a cohesive message or if he makes headlines elsewhere. But if it is, it's going to be, your life was better 4 years ago. Help me, I'm here for you. So having that consistent, tight message would be the goal. We'll see if, because both candidates have a risk of getting sidetracked on something else. Trump, you don't really know what it is. Harris, I think she sometimes risks leaning too far into the non-economic issues. And so both have a risk of not getting the headline that Americans want to see because the economy is what they want to hear about right now.
So, Kristen, your main metric of success is across all media, all platforms. You want the headline to be Trump promises economic return to economic, whatever. And for Harris, it would be Harris lays out specific agenda, blah, blah, blah. Any other metrics of success for you, or is that it?
I think that's it. The news cycle that we're in is so fast that there really isn't, these speeches, they give, at least one a day, or someone from the campaign gives one a day. So it's just a consistent drumbeat that I don't even think that there's time to have more metrics from there. But, it would be great to see, a successful campaign from here on out for the next 40 some days is going to continuously drumbeat that. And then, from whether it's a speech or whether they're at a, farm in Wisconsin or a manufacturing plant in Savannah, every single day needs to continuously come around that economic message. And that to me is the measure of success. And I think both campaigns have shown that they deviate from that sometimes.
Tim, what would be on your list of metrics of success for an economic speech at this point?
Yeah. I mean, I do think day of, day after, it's getting that paper out there to reporters, telling them what you're going to talk about. They're pre-writing what the speech looks like. Having that headline match what the headline is after the speech is generally a good metric of success. And then I do think it is throughout future days then, how is that economic agenda mentioned? Does it actually saturate media? Is it something that they actually hold on to? For Harris, for example, although it is a phrase, right, does opportunity economy and the policies that fall underneath that continue to make their way into pieces as they're talking about the economic agenda? I think another intangible that's harder to measure is, like, are you seeing any natural match with a vibe with influencers or on social media? No tax on tips, a very easy thing to say, very easy thing for people to grab onto. So look, to Kristen's point, it is repetition, right? You're saying the same thing quite a few times. We sometimes get annoyed with that. National media sometimes gets annoyed with that. But for people who are not paying attention to the news cycle every day, probably not anyone on this call, you have to find opportunities to break through. So I think it's repetition. I think it's novelty. Is it something new? It'll be interesting to see what Trump does today. I feel like his speech is an announcement to just try to stop Harris from getting a news cycle on the economy on her own. And then from there, I think it is measuring mentions and headlines.
So here's something I've told presidential candidates and campaigns in both parties for my entire career, or really since '96. And because it's good for America, but it's also good for the campaigns. And no one listens to me because it must be a bad idea. But here's my idea. When you're doing a policy rollout, don't pitch it to the political reporters, because they'll just write about the tactics and the strategy and the positioning and the framing. If I'm doing an economic speech and I'm running for president, I'm saying to my campaign, bring me the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Daily Caller, bring me all their economics reporters. And let me talk to them about the substance, either the candidate, him or herself, or the staff, and try to get economic policy stories rather than the political stories. How come no one listens to me, Kristen?
Well, sometimes a campaign doesn't want to get too much in the details. They either haven't figured it out, or with, the risk of putting out so much policy in detail like that is that it's going to get immediately picked apart and criticized. So sometimes the political reporters, the secret of the trade here is that they're going to give the top lines and the tagline, no tax on tips or opportunity economy. But I'll, kind of take it one step further. I think a compromise there would be to go to the local in-state, especially now in these battleground states, break through the noise, go to, the main reporter in Georgia, the main reporter in Wisconsin, have them write about it, get a little combination so that the people who you actually need to win the votes are going to read it versus someone who's really, really smart and going to pick apart the economic policy of the Wall Street Journal.
I should have said I only recommend it if it's actually a substantive plan. But Tim, do you agree with Kristen that my idea
look,
not good?
If you're Donald Trump and you go to an economics reporter and you say, my plan is no tax on Social Security, and they say, well, that blows a $1.6 trillion hole in the deficit, how would you deal with that? I mean, that's not a question that you want in that coverage. You want the tagline, and that's it. You don't want to be pressed on. So I agree with Kristen. I think that's why campaigns do that.
Yeah. So the Trump campaign, as I said, put out in pretty full detail what he plans to talk about today. So far, all we know about the Harris speech is what Reuters reported 2 days ago, wispy detail. Tim, do you think the Harris campaign isn't being more specific because they don't have the plan yet, or because they have some rollout idea? Why do you think we don't know more 24 hours away about what she plans to do?
Yeah. I mean, from being on these campaigns, I think the policy is probably wrapped at this point. They're probably debating over the proper rollout strategy. And I think, look, you are going to also want to see a little bit, as the Trump campaign has telegraphed, what Donald Trump is going to talk about, and see if there's any way to counterpunch or talk about something that he has mentioned in your speech as well. So I think, holding is the right option here.
All right. My spidey sense is often wrong, but it wasn't today. They did just post the interview that Kamala Harris did with Wisconsin Public Radio. I predicted also that this would not be an interview in which she was pressed on topics that she didn't want to talk about. Let's see if I'm right. Let's play the first bite. It happens to be on abortion.
I think we should eliminate the filibuster for Roe, and we need and get us to the point where 51 votes would be what we need to actually put back in law the protections for reproductive freedom.
And of course, currently with that filibuster, most legislation needs support from at least 60 senators to move forward.
One other issue we're seeing across the country is concern over the lack of affordable housing. You asked Harris about that and asked her how to address the issue in Wisconsin. What did she say?
Well, I asked her this because Wisconsin is seeing a big jump in housing prices, and she said that she can relate to renters because she grew up with a mom who was a renter, and she was a teenager before her mother could afford to buy a home. And she said she would want to have 3 million homes built in her first term and give first-time home buyers help with making that first mortgage down payment with $25,000 in assistance.
So what other issues are figuring prominently for Wisconsin voters that you asked her about?
Well, I asked her about how to deal with toxic chemicals known as PFAS that are contaminating drinking water around Wisconsin. And there are some communities here, Michelle, that have been living on bottled water for years now due to this pollution in their wells. And she said the Biden administration is funding billions in water infrastructure projects around the country to clean up drinking water and to replace lead pipes. And she said nearly $2 billion of that funding is going to Wisconsin.
The work that we are also doing, which I've been a leader on, frankly, which is dealing with lead pipes and eliminating lead pipes.
She also tried to draw a contrast between her and former President Trump on this issue, saying he has sided with companies that are polluting. And we've asked former President Trump and vice presidential nominee Senator J.D. Vance to be on our show and to discuss this issue and others facing Wisconsinites.
And what have they said?
We haven't heard back yet.
You can hear Harris's full interview with Kate Archer-Kent later today on Wisconsin Public Radio. Kate Archer-Kent in Madison, thank you so much.
All right.
You're welcome.
So we had one soundbite from her on this issue. Now, somebody will tell me if I'm wrong. I think that's the first time she said, eliminate the filibuster for Roe. Am I wrong about that, or is that the first time?
I think that's right.
Anybody
I think that's the first time she said there should be a carve-out.
Yeah. Okay. So that's big news. And it seems to me, I'll weigh in first, it seems to me it's smart because while Mitch McConnell won't like it and Senate institutionalists won't like it, it's a pretty bold statement about the value she puts on passing, codifying Roe with legislation. So, Kristen, smart politics for her to take that position or not?
In the short term, I'm sure it is, but I think where, this debate over the filibuster, whether it's about abortion or, we've had the debate multiple times, what proponents of it don't think about is the long term. At some point, you're not going to be there and someone's going to use it to advocate a policy that you're on the other side. So I think it's a very, I get it. She became the nominee in the last inning and she's trying to catch up, but it's very short-term politics. It's short-term sugar high, and maybe it works. Maybe in 40 some days it's enough, but in the long term, I don't think it's well thought through to how it will actually impact the institution and frankly, the future of either side of what they want to, advocate and get done.
Big Tim and Kamala Harris would just like to win the election in the short term, and they'll deal with the institutional questions later. Tim, do you agree with me and Kristen, I guess also that at least for the campaign, this is a good position for her to take?
It makes sense. It's such a important issue. It's an issue that they're campaigning heavily on. It's an issue that they have a huge advantage on. It's an issue that lets them press the gender gap and be able to say, look, we're going to be able to actually get something done on this and not just say codify Roe and leave it at that. I think it's smart.
Okay. Again, if you'd like to get in the conversation, we're going to go to you all shortly. We're going to turn everything else in the rapid round because we played so much time with that NPR thing. So if you'd like to get a question in or make a comment, please raise your hand. As always, we welcome new folks to be part of it. So guys, let's do rapid round on this. Just one or two sentences each. Tim, how do you expect the Trump campaign to try to bracket, which is the term you political people use to do stuff on the front end and the back end of Harris's apparent visit to the border later in the week? What would you expect them to do?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if there is a press conference that they hold or they have allies in Arizona, but they're going to do what they're going to do. And it's the same talking point of she was the border czar. The border is all her problem. I don't think we're going to see anything new from them. I think you're just going to see an event pop up to do exactly what you said, just bracket her visit.
Kristen, what would your messaging be and your strategy be to bracket her visit to the border?
Yeah, well, I think you would have so much fun with this right now. I mean, the advanced team, the political team must be having so much fun because it's such an opportunity. What I would probably do is in every single one of these swing states, I would identify a family who had a member die from either gang violence or fentanyl, or some real life face of the border crisis to show that Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, North Carolina, these are all border states. And I would put them on the local news. I would have an event simultaneously at the same time on the front end and the back end of Harris's stop there to have real Americans, real swing state voters saying, Vice President Harris caused this crisis, caused my loved one to die, caused the skyrocketing crime, caused the influx of gang violence in our metro area. There's so much opportunity here, what they can do. But I think really the best advocate and the best messenger on this, aside from Trump, are the real people who are being affected by it.
Yep. All right, last two are going to be, I'm going to ask you for numbers on a scale of 0 to 10. If we have our sound effects, please get them ready. 0 to 10, 0 being no impact, and 10 being Mark Robinson cost Donald Trump the electoral votes of North Carolina. Where do you place it today? 0, no impact, 10, cost him the electoral votes. Tim?
7.
7. Kristen?
I'm a 3. I don't think there are a whole lot of Robinson, not Trump voters. I'm pretty sure that he was going to pull Robinson over the line. I think it could be a 7 if Robinson says or does something that Vance or Trump, trip on. But if they just ignore and keep pushing, I think it's probably a 3.
I'm also not convinced
both
that he's going to ignore Robinson. Like I have a feeling like he could come back and embrace him. Like it's possible.
And embrace him, but not repudiate him. All right, you're both wrong. Buzzer, we have it. Maybe we don't. Yeah, there you go. It's a 5. It's a perfect 5. All right. Lastly, how much does what happens on Capitol Hill matter? All these press conferences and stunt bills, messaging bills. How much does it matter in impacting the presidential race? 0, no impact. 10, Mike Johnson and Hakeem Jeffries are basically running this thing. Kristen?
Oh, man. I'm going to say a 5 or a 6. It just depends. If they shut the government down, that's a problem. But if they, just keep it
5
level.
or 6. Tim?
I was looking at some polling on this. Navigator research said 7 out of 10 Americans do not want the government shut down over any issue, but only 2 out of 5 are really following it. So I'm going to play like Price is Right here and say 4.
Wrong. You're both wrong. The answer, 1. The answer, 1. The answer is 1. It doesn't matter at all. It's insane. I'm not going to get into it. All right. Let's bring folks in. As always, tell people who don't know, because they're new to the platform, where you are, who you're supporting, and what's on your mind. John and company, unmute, please. Unmute. There you go.
You got me?
Welcome in. We do. Tell us again where you are, who you're supporting, and what's on your mind.
Okay. From Florida, an independent. Not supporting Trump. I think he's a loose cannon. He worries me.
Did you vote for him in 16 or 20?
No. I voted.
And are you voting for Harris? Are you voting for Harris?
I am voting for Harris, and I'm bleeding from the lip. I'm very nervous.
And are you speaking for the whole family today, or?
Yes.
Yeah, you're both voting for Harris. All right. What's your question, please?
Well, it's interesting because you invite me on, and I'm going to go off topic immediately. One of the things that really bothers me, and I'm really glad that Kristen's here today, is that the Project 2025, to me, is a direct assault on the Constitution. And I was absolutely shocked the first time that I saw Kristen on this show when she said she didn't know anything about it. And you, and I'm really glad you did, said, no, it is an issue. And to me, it is an issue because this is a direct, if you look at the Christian nationalists, and if you look at 2025, on the surface, it looks like all of these policy issues, conservative policy issues, but when you go underneath it and you see all the references to God and the Bible and faith-based institutions, you see that it's really aiming at Christian nationalism and a direct assault on the separation of church and state.
Okay. All right. Hold on. Now, Kristen didn't say she didn't know anything about it. She said she didn't think it was that big an issue. We'll see if she's
Oh,
revised and
okay.
extended her view in a moment.
Ties into you
But do
saying
you
that
have but do you have a question, John, or you just wanted to make that
Yeah,
point?
the question is, why is this flying under the radar? It's like everybody's talking about, economy and immigration, and
Right.
this is the
Okay.
underpinning.
Well,
Everything
all right.
flows
All
from
right.
that.
Yep. I don't think it's flying under the radar. I think it's the Democrats have done a masterful job of keeping it whatever the opposite of under the radar is. Kristen, what's your current view of the impact of Project 2025?
Well, I'll say you've converted me into thinking that this is that it's definitely more than I dismissed it as. I still haven't read it. I won't read it. It's not part of what anyone that I'm running a campaign for is focused on. But I do think it's not necessarily the difference is it's not the Project 2025 itself. It's just that Democrats have done such a good job of using that term to bucket everything they want to hit Republicans on for being too extreme. So in 2022, after Roe, we saw abortion ads and January 6 ads. And I remember watching, I'm in Northern Virginia, I'm in the DC market. I saw so many ads every single day with 3 congressional races hitting on January 6th. And I'm wondering what is happening. And it's just this, in these swing states kind of making Republicans seem extreme and outside the main line. I think that's what Democrats are trying to do in 2025. It's totally disingenuous this time around. Everyone has said they disavowed it. This is a think tank, the same thing as the extreme fringe climate change groups that say we should take meat out of our pyramids. It's the same type of thing. And no one is running on this platform. Trump, to his credit, had dismissed it very, very early. And I don't think, we can step in it every now and then, but Republicans typically have stayed at arm's length. Doesn't matter. Democrats are going to say what they're going to say. I still think that most people are decided in this election. I think the undecided voters, here's a hot take. I don't think there are that many. I think that right now, the polls show that there's probably just undecided whether they're going to vote or not because they don't like either candidate. So who makes them feel like they can actually hold their nose and show up to go vote? So I don't think this is necessarily, if anything, it's going to get the base more fired up. I don't think it's convincing that many undecided voters because I really don't think there are that many. At the end of the day, those folks are, it could change some, especially particularly women, and grow that gender gap. But overall, I think this is something that we're talking about that may not have the same impact as we saw in 2022, but I'm open to being wrong on that.
All right. Well, I'm not going to let Tim say very much because it's just going to be more gloating about how successful it is.
I just remember early on.
Is it 10 or 11? How valuable is it? 10 or 11?
11. Look, I will just say very early on this show, I said that Project 2025 is going to be a thing, and the NBC polling I think is what's driving the conversation about it now. 57% unfavorability, 4% favorability, and I think, just Kristen, to your point, I think there are so many inroads for Democrats to tie it to Trump that it will have some impact, whether it's people who have worked for him working on the plan, whether it's heritage in the past praising him on implementing policies that were like similar tranche of this, or JD Vance writing the forward. Is it going to seep through and be that deciding factor for, and I agree with Kristen, a small amount of undecided voters? Unclear, but I think as a branding project, the Democrats have pretty much nailed it.
And it makes Blue America feel great. John, thank you for joining. Come back regularly, please. Appreciate it. All right, Susan, welcome in. Folks who don't know where you are, who you're supporting, and what's on your mind, please.
Am I okay? I'm unmuted. I am from Florida. I'm a new Florida resident. Moved here because of a stupid governor in Virginia, not Youngkin. And I am supporting Trump. I think he's a pig. I have no respect for him, but his policies are good for me and my family.
That's spoken like a resident of the free state of Florida, Susan.
Yes.
Susan, are you tempted to vote for Kamala Harris because you think your candidate's a pig, or not even tempted?
I am all for women, but I don't trust her. And that is my thing. People will not ask her, when did you know Biden had a problem? Because I think it was known before he ran, which is why they kept him in the basement. And it proved to be a winning strategy for the Democrats. And now keeping her away from media that's going to ask hard questions, I hope that's not a winning strategy, because haven't we learned our lesson?
Yeah, Susan, have you voted for Trump in 16 and 20 also?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I don't like him personally.
Yeah.
I'm talking,
Yeah.
but I look at his policies.
Yeah. Susan, do you have a question, or did you want to make that point? Because I bet Tim and Kristen have questions for you, but did you want to ask a question?
No, I just wanted to make that comment about, can't anybody ask her about Biden?
Yeah. Well, I bet it didn't come up in the NPR interview, even though I haven't heard it. That's my guess.
Oprah. Or Oprah.
Yeah. Or Oprah. Yeah. Or ABC or debate or Tim or Kristen, you got any questions for Susan?
I just out of curiosity, this isn't super informative to me, but who did you support in the Republican primary?
Trump.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it was probably over by the time we got to Florida.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like the guy, but he has proven that his policies are good for me and my family. And that I don't care about his personality. He's not going to come to a dinner party here. We're not going to be socializing together, but his policies are good. And I don't know what her policies are, and I don't trust her.
If you could pick a Republican candidate to swap in for Trump, who would you pick?
Nikki Haley.
Okay.
What about Governor DeSantis? Or
Ron DeSantis, but he didn't do well on the stage, so hopefully he'll get that together.
All right, Kristen, do you have a question for Susan?
Do you like JD Vance?
He's okay.
Would you have been happier if Haley was the VP?
Yes.
There you go. That's the voter.
Yeah, there you go. All right, Susan, thank you. Appreciate it. Come back often. All right, Katie, welcome back. Tell folks who don't know where you are, who you're supporting, and what's on your mind, please.
Good morning. I am from Portland, Oregon, just outside of Portland, Oregon. I'm voting for Trump. I wanted to touch on the previous point of Project 2025. I'm very concerned also about the Middle East. So on the flip side of that, also, like the marches that we're seeing in New York City, with the mostly college students, kind of reminds me of like the riots we saw here in Portland. But it's, to me, I'm a child of 9/11. I was 12 years old. And to see a generation removed from 9/11, that you're seeing, I don't want to say supporters of Islamic terrorism, but you know, you see Hamas supporters marching in the streets of New York City, and Harris isn't even being asked about it. I guess for me, I see the hysteria around Project 2025. My response would be, what we're seeing from the Democratic Party and this flirtation with extremism is very concerning to me. Like, especially given what's going on in the Middle East right now.
Katie, thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah. Tim and then Kristen, I'll warn our affiliates we're going to run a little bit over today because I got a couple more folks I want to get in. But Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there have been instances. There are people who are concerned with the well-being and safety of Palestinians, and I do not think that aligns them with Hamas. I think that is a concern about civilians there. I will also say, though, there have been instances, for example, when Netanyahu visited and gave a speech to Congress, where we saw at Union Station flag burning, terrible activity, defacing property, and you saw both the president and vice president come out and condemn that behavior. And I think that's the right tone. I think that's the right move. So I think in those instances, you have seen Biden and Harris call it out for what it is.
Sure, but you also have Tlaib and the others.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I mean, Harris and Waltz, there are people who wonder if she picked Tim Waltz because she wouldn't pick Josh Shapiro. I mean, if Josh Shapiro would have been a great pick. He would have swept Pennsylvania. My whole family's in Pennsylvania. They love him. The Republicans, they love him. And to even have that hanging over the ticket like that potentially, you know, she was afraid of the anti-Semitic base. I mean, that's pretty tough. So yeah, there are fringes there. I do think that, you know, I'm glad Katie brought that up because it is, you know, something that is even more concerning than Project 2025, because Project 2025 is a think piece written by a think tank. What we see on the left is actual siding with and encouraging Israel activity and words. And when you have members of Congress sitting in the chamber disrespecting the leader of another nation is absolutely absurd. And so they haven't done enough. Harris has not done enough to call that out. And it is a major concern that I think a lot of people have. So I'm glad Katie brought that up.
Katie, thank you. Kristen, can you stay with us a couple more minutes?
Yeah, I can.
All right. Thank you. All right. Let's bring in Diane. Diane, thanks for joining. Thanks for bringing that company with you. Adorable. Unmute if you would. There you go. Hi.
Hey, I just kind of know what you think about the lack of confidence in Vice President Harris. She has one job, which is to be the vice president, the president, in case the actual president is not able to fulfill his duties as president. Do you think that her decision to not take responsibility for that and call a cabinet meeting is undermining her confidence?
Okay, Diane, I assume you're a Trump voter, right?
I am, yeah.
Yeah. And what state are you in?
Iowa.
Iowa. Okay. There you go. Let's see. Kristen, this is something obviously some people on the right say that she's got a responsibility to speak up, not only to answer the question, what did she know about and what did she think about his mental capacities, but to do more. Do you think that's an issue? Go ahead, Diane.
I think it's actually I actually feel like, not even from a political place, but it's kind of scary because it's not just 6 weeks of the election, but then there's 3 months later, and I'm kind of looking around thinking like, we don't actually have someone in charge. It feels like, and even if it was Vice President Harris, to me that would be better than no one.
Yeah. Okay, Kristen, what are you thinking then, Tim? Thank you, Diane.
Yeah, I think we definitely have glossed over, what's going on there. And every now and then you are reminded, oh, wait, where is the president? What is he doing? And it's sad for him because I think, even Republicans view President Biden as a public servant. And so it's sad to see how he's, being treated and kind of pushed out. But I think overall, it does add to the lack of confidence in her because she hasn't done anything to establish that. She hasn't, she was vice president for the last 4 years. She was the border czar. She brags about casting the tie-breaking vote for the Inflation Reduction Act, which probably caused the skyrocketing inflation. And so she can say all she wants. Well, I wasn't president. I was just there. But then seeing, now that they have removed him from the ticket and put her in, it does, people do wonder, well, why weren't you doing anything? And what did you know when you know it? I think there are a lot of questions there, which frankly is probably why she's sticking to NPR interviews in Wisconsin and doesn't really do a whole lot of other interviews, because she's going to run the clock out, not have to answer the questions, not have to be put in uncomfortable situations, and try to see if vibes get her over the finish line. I'm not sure that they will. I think that's the reason why we're still in a margin error 1.2 point race in all these key states. And at the end of the day, she has not yet earned the trust or confidence in a lot of these voters because she hasn't addressed any of that.
Tim, as we used to say on the McNeil Laird News Hour, that's not how you see it, is it, Tim?
Look, he's giving 3 speeches today, including one to the United Nations General Assembly and then holding a bilateral meeting. I know that the right-wing narrative is that he has completely disappeared. He is non-existent, but he's out there, he's speaking, he's holding events. So I also do think, look, in terms of questions, like, voters are mostly, I think, undecided voters in particular, forward-looking. So the point of like, why is this not being discussed more? I think because voters care about what's going to happen for them in the future. I think that's why you're not getting a focus on it.
Diane, how'd you find two-way?
I feel like Joe Biden was the one over a cabinet meeting the other day, and Joe Biden was not there. So when you have the first lady running a cabinet meeting, that does raise questions. It's not just a fringe narrative.
He was there. He just was the warm-up act. Diane, right. How did you find two-way?
Mark, I've been following you since the circus.
All right, welcome back. Thank you for joining. Please come back regularly, and we appreciate your input. Thank you. All right, so while Diane was speaking, I consulted the two-way hosting manual about what to do if you just by chance call on 2 red state Trump supporters in a row to close out the program. And what the manual says is try to find someone who's a Manhattan Harris supporter, who's one of the funniest and most thoughtful people in politics, Therefore, I bring you Harris voter Mark Katz. Mark, welcome in.
You're very kind, Mark. I live in Brooklyn. I forgot to send you a change of address form.
Oh, Brooklyn. Well,
Okay,
it's still New York City.
That is true. I want to talk about the speech that is not being given, that's been top of mind for me in the last 24 hours, which is Vice President Harris's declining invitation to speak at the Al Smith dinner. I think that has the potential to be the second most second-guessed thing if things don't go well for her. I think those dinners are such an opportunity to say the unsaid. If they're self-administered character tests, and the only way to fail it is to not show up. And I feel very upset and flummoxed why they wouldn't take that opportunity to use humor, to find the joy in the campaign, address the things that are hard to say that can only be said with humor. And I think it's a real missed opportunity. And I can't for the life of me figure out why I said no thank you.
Spoken like a man who's earned his living writing comedy jokes for Democrats at high-profile events. But I hear what you're saying. Finish up, Mark, and then we'll all respond.
Okay, one thing. Here's how I see to fix it. She says, "You know what? I've given it a second thought. I will show up at the Al Smith dinner if you do the second debate." And they swap, and they both. It's a win-win for her.
Yeah.
And it makes her look good and funny. Everyone else can.
Kind of horse trading we do in Brooklyn. I think it's a high risk room for her. Yes, it's funny. Yes, there's a script, but that room is very pro-life. That room is very demanding. She has to respond to what Trump says, whether he goes first or second. She's got to be thinking about it. So I think for a campaign which is shying away from risk, it's not a surprise to me. It might be in the end the wrong decision, but it's not a surprise to me that she didn't want to be in that room. I've been in that room. It seems like it's an easy room because it's all about comedy. It is a tough room. Kristen.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think she's seasoned enough to actually handle the bobbing she'd have to do there. I think she did the debate and overperformed, and everyone came away from that thinking how great and talented she was, and she could mop the floor. I think there were cartoons of her mopping the floor with Trump. I think she would come out of the Al Smith dinner the opposite, because I just don't think she's as cool and confident, and frankly, Trump shines in dinners and situations like that. So it's probably smart for them. I don't know the long-term impact. I don't know how many voters in Raleigh, North Carolina, or Luzerne County, Pennsylvania care about that dinner, but overall it would drive the narrative, and I think it would hurt her, because I just don't think she's comfortable enough to bob and weave the way Trump can.
Tim, I was in a Green Bay diner over the weekend when it was announced that she wasn't going, and it's all anybody was talking about. Just kidding. No one cares.
Yeah, no,
Tim,
exactly.
Tim.
I just, it's not going to move anybody who needs to be moved. And it's worth remembering that Trump essentially blew up that dinner in 2016 with how he approached it. So it was not so funny as much as a speech to just attack. And I think in 2020, if I remember correctly, both sides just sent videos. And so this is our first time in the Trump era where we've asked, does the Al Smith dinner, does it continue? And it's trying to make, again, Trump fit an institution that he doesn't really fit cleanly into. So I don't disagree with the decision.
Mark Katz, the bottom line for me is between AI, Google, and Harris's decision to skip the Al Smith dinner. I no longer think Americans can tell their children they can grow up to write jokes for presidents. It's no longer a career that you could count on. Mark Katz, thank you. Appreciate it. Kristen, thanks for joining. I hope you'll come back regularly. Even when Sean is available, we hope you'll come back regularly.
Of course.
Tim, thank you. Enjoy New York City. Again, don't take any Lyfts or Ubers, just subways and city bikes, or you'll curse the traffic. Thank you all for watching. Thanks everybody who had questions. I'll be back later today. Put up the promo because I don't remember what time we said. Apparently, I'll be back at 5 Eastern time. We'll play more of the NPR interview. We'll look at Donald Trump's economic speech. It's possible, again, I'm going on Spidey sense here, we may know more about Kamala Harris's economic agenda by 5 o'clock tonight. So join. There'll be some great guests. Maybe Kristen and Tim will cameo. Who knows? So see you at 5 Eastern. And then tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, Sean may well be back from assignment. And Tim will be here. Kristen, again, thank you. Thanks, everybody, for joining. We'll see you later today.